Bird flu, Charles.
Back to bird flu, indeed. The spectre of yet another terrifying disease looms over us, and UK column has been reporting on this for some time, prompted now by the announcement last week that the government is introducing new measures to combat bird flu, but essentially to invite, or rather order, everybody that keeps poultry to register their birds. Now, before you tune out because you don't keep poultry, I would put it to you, this has absolutely nothing to do with poultry, nothing to do with health, everything to do with fear, control, surveillance, and compliance, as well as big pharma. So you see here, the information on the register will also be used to identify all bird keepers in disease controlled zones, allowing for more effective surveillance. Of course, they're putting it forward as though it's efficiency. Now, this has come from a recommendation from a 2018 document put together by Dame Glenys Stacey. Here it is, the Farm Inspection and Regulation Review, and the most standout sentence from her forward is here, which exemplifies the lack of trust that our government has for its populace. Regulation is really all about getting people to act in ways they would not otherwise choose, for the best. So this sets the tone for the way in which people are to be treated with regard to the keeping of poultry, although, as I say, this is actually not really the subject matter of it. We'll go back and have a look to see how this has come about, because, of course, the government did run a consultation last year in 2023, and they produced or published a summary of responses to go alongside the announcement of the new measures. The options, if you're unable to see the screen, were baseline, which is to do nothing. In effect, the situation at the moment is that if you have 50 birds or fewer, you don't have to register them. And that was the baseline. Therefore, you could opt to keep the status quo, or option one, the government's preferred option, which is to extend the requirement in order that everybody who keeps any birds at all should not only register, but have to provide a mandatory annual update. Or option two, for the keepers of 10 birds or more, or you don't have a preferred option. Now, it will probably not surprise you to learn that the overwhelming majority, 75% of the 3,419 respondents, said that they did not want any change to the status quo. And option one, the preferred option by government, which is effectively to surveil everybody all the time, was only selected by 13% of people. And to anybody who's ever signed a government petition, you will know, therefore, that the government have gone ahead and done it anyway. Now, where's this come from? The chief vet at the moment is a lady called Christine Middlemiss. She's been in post since 2018. But what I want to draw your attention to is her work in New South Wales, Australia, which is where she was before, and specifically the introduction of risk-based biosecurity legislation and risk-based disease control approaches. The New South Wales Biosecurity Act, which came out in 2015, was effectively implemented under her tenure in Australia. We'll look at a video of that in extra to see exactly where it comes from. But what they're doing here is pushing the narrative to capture effectively everything. So they say here the change to bird registration is required in order to protect the health of poultry and other captive birds, and also public health. But of course, that's just stated without qualification. Now, the reason for that is what they want you to believe is that bird flu is not only present, but also can be caught by things other than birds and maybe humans. Now, that's why I make the reference specifically to this being relevant to all of us. So let's just have an examination of the sort of biosecurity background to it. This is from November 2021, what's called the latest situation, in which they say that it's in no way connected to the COVID pandemic, which is caused by the SARS-CoV-2 virus and not carried in poultry. Now, my contention is that this is exactly like the COVID pandemic in that it's entirely fabricated, overstated, and without any kind of scientific background whatsoever. The reason I'm able to say that is because we first of all look at the situation on the ground, updated on the 21st of March. Now, according to the APHA, the Plant Health agency, there are, at any one time in the UK, approximately 400 million birds, poultry birds, live in the country. And on the screen here, in the last 6 months, since 1st of October 2023, there have been 4 cases of bird flu in England, 2 cases in Scotland, and 0 in Wales and Northern Ireland. A quite astonishing statistic, and yet they are able to declare an emergency. Of course they are. Now, I went into the scientific side of it. You may remember from a previous update that I submitted a Freedom of Information request in March last year to find out what, apart from the PCR test, which I should remind you is not a diagnostic tool and may not diagnose a condition. It cannot tell you if you are ill or if you're going to be ill or what effect any of that may cause. Nonetheless, the answers to the questions were as such. I asked whether they tested the birds' water and feed. The answer was APHA do not carry out tests on water or feed. I asked if they tested the bird's blood to detect any toxicity in the blood. They do not perform toxicity tests on the bird's blood. I also asked about environmental toxicity, and they do not carry out tests on the environment. So, in effect, bird flu is little more than a concept, but it's a very, very useful concept. And indeed, it's one, as I say, that is essentially the sort of kernel of a narrative that can be expanded and expanded. And it's exactly what they're doing here. So we see the announcement on screen now of bird flu being found in mammals in the sub-Antarctic, which was a couple of months ago. And on it goes. Now, of course, where's it going? Vaccines. The European Medicines Agency here talking about pandemic influenza. And there's just a few bits I want to draw your attention to here, specifically because not only are they using the bird flu, they're talking about strains of bird flu. Again, this is all hypothetical because of the sort of closed loop science behind it. But they're talking about strains of bird flu being used in vaccines. And here we go, the highlighted text that could potentially cause a pandemic. They then go on to say that they can be authorized but not marketed before an influenza pandemic. And this is called, we're talking here specifically about Aflunov, which was a medicine that withdrawn back in 2008. But nonetheless, it's the language that's important. And again, highlighted text. It's intended to protect against a strain of flu that may cause a future pandemic. And I think you can see where this is going. They go on to say that the next flu pandemic could be caused by the H5N1 strain of the virus. Well, lo and behold, that is exactly what they're talking about when they refer to bird flu in this country at the moment. And critically, finally, they say it could be used before or during a flu pandemic. So there's a lot to sort of unpack from that. But I think really the takeaway point, as I said, is the absolute lack of trust, the complete abandonment of the democratic process, or indeed any heed being paid to the responses from people who've decided that they want to keep poultry for reasons of their own. And this is just, follows the last segment really. The level of government interference and arrogance, frankly, is perfectly astonishing. And it will be interesting to see what the response to this, any action going to be taken by the public will be.
Yeah, Charles, thank you for that.